Good evening, everybody. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. P.
Okay. Mr. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, are you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
How was your day?
Oh, my day. Don't let me bore you with my day gist. So today we have some back and forth between the stakeholders and the solution architects. Okay, so we are trying to balance what they want versus what is visible. So sometimes as a BA, you just be the referee, Then okay, this is sometimes the solution architect will try to explain, they will not understand it, so I now have to come up and say, oh no, this is how it's meant to be, and also it was an interesting meeting. We ended up spending almost 1 hour, and it is so the stakeholder cut across, I think, different 3 continents: US, UK, and I think Singapore. Yeah. So it was an interesting, just quite interesting, but at some point I was scared because at some point the stakeholders are trying to, say some of those requirements make it or mar it. It's either it is possible or it is not, Sometimes you get scared as a BA because if you are at the point of designing a solution and the stakeholder now say, no, we are not going forward with this solution again. It's not so good for your own rep, meaning you should have seen such kind of situation ahead.
Yeah, rising, yeah.
And find a way to arrest it. So at some point, I just discovered that what was causing the argument was just miscommunication. So I just step in and I just explain, this is what the solution architect is saying. And okay, if that's what you're saying, that's actually what they wanted. So again, communication comes.
Yeah, I did, there's one project I ran where I had to do, I did this MasterCard MSO integration.
Okay.
Merchant service integration. So the project manager was in Australia. The project owner, project owners were in China, and we were in Nigeria. So it's a project where, I don't know if you heard of OPay.
Yes, I think I heard of OPay.
Yeah, so OPay, is a Chinese company, but their biggest in terms of transaction size, in terms of GTV, as transaction market, their biggest transaction market is actually Nigeria. So they were trying to run a MasterCard integration project that would cover all of OPay, OPay Global. So they are in Tanzania, they're in Kenya, they're in Ghana, they're in Senegal, they're in South Africa, they're in Egypt. So usually if you want to save money, what you just do is that you just do one merchant service integration to MasterCard. Then other branches can now connect. And yeah, they had like similar issue like this. The guys in China, they were saying they wanted a situation whereby they will control everything from China. And MasterCard was saying, based on regulations in Nigeria, that's not possible.
Yeah.
So the rule in Nigeria is if you connect like that, the admin must be in Nigeria.
Yeah, for them to coordinate.
Yeah, and because the Chinese company, the guys in China were like saying, no, it must be in China. And in the end, because I've done that project before, I just said, you know what, let's do it like this. It's a global project, yeah? Break the access into 2. Anything that has to do with Nigeria, you will have an admin in Nigeria. Anything that has to do with all other branches out of Nigeria. You understand?
You
The
will have
admin
it.
will now be in China. Do you
China.
understand?
Yeah.
So if they need anything in Nigeria, they just speak to the guy in Nigeria. The guy in Nigeria gives them access, because the rule is, if anything goes wrong, you understand, CBN will come for that admin. Because once you register like that, you must advise CBN of a lot of things.
Okay.
So anything goes wrong, maybe like a fraudulent transaction goes through the system, maybe like, these guys that do all this fraudulent transaction, Ponzi, they also use payment gateways to get their money. So if a Ponzi transaction goes through, then they don't want to know. They just go after the admin. So the admin in Nigeria must make sure. You get what I'm saying? The guys in China, they just want transactions to go through because they want to make their money. But the guy in Nigeria, even though he wants a transaction, he doesn't want a transaction that will send him to DSS.
Illegal transaction should go through. Yeah.
Thank you. He doesn't want to spend the night in DSS cell.
Yeah. And I think those periods, there's a lot of talk about terrorism financing, and all. Yeah. So I think so thank you very much, and for sharing your project experience with us again. For me, would you like to give us a gist about your birthday yesterday?
Thank you. There's no so much because I had to go to work in the morning. I came back at the exact time that the kids are supposed to be back from school, so I had to go to their school, pick them up. And nothing more. I was on my bed responding to messages and doing
I'm
the training.
blushing, right?
There's no fun. So the fun is to the weekend. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So we have some companies that they give them public holiday for birthdays. Are you aware that on your birthday they will not allow you to come to work? They will give you a day off.
I wish to connect me to those kind of companies.
Don't worry. I mean, you may be looking at that. May be one of your requirements when you're looking out for a job. You just say that they will tell you birthday holidays.
My most requirement is money and hybrid working. Is that holiday for birthday? That one can shift.
Okay. Goodness. How are you doing today? And I'm talking about Goodness Okafor.
I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm doing well.
Are you fully with us today?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Has anybody noticed that Goodness has not been giving us our utmost attention recent in 2 days? Patrick, did you notice? For me, did you notice?
Did I notice? Not really. She did this thing for us now.
That was 3 days ago.
And she bailed me out yesterday. And Mr. Patrick, they both bailed me out. So
she the one that bailed you out, or Goodness and Yanwu?
Do I know the difference? I think one of them has very good voice. I just said any Goodness.
Okay. So Lekon, can you give us an overview of what we're studying? Lekon, can you give us like an overview of what we learned yesterday? Thank you.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Lekon.
Yeah. Yesterday we talked about sources of requirements yesterday. And we mentioned of clients, pre-existing system, pre-existing documents, competing system, yeah. And then domain experts, documentation about interfacing, standard, and then legislation. Okay, yeah, that's the last one.
Okay. So thank you. Goodness Anyanwu, can you explain to us how documentation about system interfacing, how is it a source of requirement?
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Okay, we discussed that for that you need to carry out system integration programs. That means like understand and also document the corresponding systems. You use an instance, an earpiece and a phone. So if you're working on an earpiece or to produce an earpiece, you need to also look at the phone to make sure that the earpiece fits into the phone.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Richie, what are functional requirements?
I wasn't available yesterday. Sorry, I didn't attend the class.
Okay. Who will help us out? Who is going to help Richard answer our questions? What are functional requirements? What are functional requirements? Anybody?
Okay, sir. Functional requirements can be simply put as the action the product can perform. So what a product can do basically, and then we give a very good example of the simplest one that we can quickly relate with. That is an ATM, and that's basically we're looking at what an ATM can do, the basic features. That's just the
Okay. Thank you very much. Taiwo, what are non-functional requirements?
Sorry, I was in a class yesterday.
Okay. Bamidele, what are non-functional requirements? Patrick, would you like to help?
Yeah. So which one are we asking? A non-functional or functional now?
Non-functional requirements.
So non-functional requirements describe the general properties of a system. So these are like the general characteristics or functions really that it should have. Things like security, scalability, speed. So that's just what it is, just the general properties that a system should have.
Okay. So, I mean, you guys are very correct. So, but you know, in case you're writing your IIBA, you know, this is just a textbook definition for you to take note of, okay? So functional requirement is a statement of what a product, remember what I say, product, system, subsystem, system component, device, software, solution must do. What a product must do. The action, just like what Dare said, the action that a system is enabled to do, like the ATM, dispense cash, accept card, debit account, credit account, you know, those are definitive action, you know, and that's what we call functional requirement. Why non-functional requirements? They are statements of what a product is or how it will be constructed, or a constraint on how the product will be designed or behave. Remember, it can be the description of the product. It can also be how did they expect the product to be constructed? How do they expect the product to be designed? Or what are the limitations? What are the constraints that you need to put in place? And another one that is very important is how a product will behave. And that's how we talk about the performance, the speed, and all. Okay? So these are further examples of functional requirement, because we talk a lot of, we discussed a lot of things about non-functional requirement yesterday, but today we'll be looking into functional requirement. Okay, and these are example of functional requirement. So the first one we have is what we call these are just for textbook. Okay, nobody will ask you to say, okay, this requirement you are writing down, is it an ubiquitous requirement or not? So I don't want you guys to stretch yourself so much, but it's good for you to know, because you'll be writing your IB exams and BCS. We just need to balance it. Okay. So some of the example of functional requirement, we have what we call the ubiquitous requirements. So these are requirements that's talking about the requirements that are always active, more like the continuous actions that they want the system to do. Look at this example we give here. Say the control system shall prevent engine overspeed. So it means the control system will continuously prevent the engine from overspeeding. It does not prevent the engine from overspeeding in the first minute, at every instance. So this is talking about continuous actions. It's talking about an action that's always active, and that's what we call some of them, it's still an action, but it is continuous. So we call those type of requirements ubiquitous requirements. So another requirement is, we call it state-driven requirements. This is an action that is active within a defined state. It is active throughout the time of statement remains true. Okay, so this is an action that is. Look at the example we give here. Say why the aircraft is in flight. That is a state. That's what we call state-driven requirements. The requirement is active only within the set boundaries, within a set state. You see, why the aircraft is in flight and the engine is running, the control system shall maintain the engine fuel flow above this. So it means, what happens if the aircraft is on the ground? Anybody?
There won't be need for the function.
Yeah, it means there won't be need for this function. There won't be need for this requirement. If the aircraft is on the ground, there won't be need for this requirement. Why? Because the requirement is a state-driven requirement. Okay? And you need to know all this type, so that when you are documenting the requirement, you have an understanding of the scope of functional requirement. Note, functional requirements are action, telling you about the function. But now we are further giving you example of functional requirement. The first one is when it's a continuous action. The another type is when it's a state-driven action. Another state-driven action can be when for example, some of us that we have heater in our houses, once you put the heater in automatic, so once and you set the temperature to, for example, let's set the temperature to 20, and the action will be, once the temperature gets below 20, the heater should start. The thermostat should start the heater. That's a state-driven requirement. When the temperature is above 20, the heater into the house, it can work, but it will not be working. But once the temperature falls below 20, immediately it is below 20, it is 19.9, then the thermometer should start the heater. So those are what we call state-driven requirements. So another one is what we call event-driven requirements. So this requirement requires a response only when an event is detected at the system boundaries. In other words, they are triggered by specific events. For example, when continuous ignition is commanded by the aircraft, the control system shall switch off the continuous ignition. So we can see this is an event, continuous ignition. When you try to ignite the aircraft for the first time, and by the way, this is talking about an aircraft system. Okay. So when you want to start the aircraft the first time, it may not do anything, because that could be like a state, but because it is event driven, it's when there is a continuous ignition is commanded by the aircraft, then the control system shall switch on the continuous ignitions. And that is a event driven. That's the event that will drive this requirement is continuous ignition. Then once that continuous ignition happens, then they expect the control system to automatically do what? Switch on the continuous ignition. And that is event-driven reaction. Event-driven requirements. We can also see this in a car. For example, when you are driving a car, and the requirement will be when your car was hit by, maybe you slam the brake of your car continuously, then they expect your electronic braking system to come in. Okay, so when you put your feet on the car, you slam your feet on the car without removing it, then they expect the electronic braking system to commence. Those are events. Those are event-driven reactions, event-driven requirements, that something must happen that will trigger the requirements to commence. Let me also give an example with the ATM. Can somebody give me an event-driven requirement with the ATM machine? Anybody?
Yeah, like when you leave your ATM card in the slot for a while, the stock sitting, it takes it to you have to go inside to request for it to be pulled out.
Okay, goodness. I think the ATM machine here, they don't take ATM cards in. Okay.
It doesn't.
So, but yeah, they don't.
So why do I have to go inside all the time to go and get my ATM? I thought it does.
No, they don't. Okay. So so an event-driven requirement for ATM. Another trial. Event-driven requirement for the ATM machine.
Yeah, so once you slot your card in now,
yes,
it's supposed to do some checks on the chip of the card before. So you have to put your PIN. So really, once you put your PIN, that's when it initiates the transaction.
Okay. So Patrick,
sorry,
thank you.
Sorry, go on.
I don't want you to go too much. The event-driven requirement in that ATM is when you put your card, you slot your card into the card slot of the ATM. The ATM accepts your card. Have you guys noticed when you put in your card, you will notice a force will drag your card inside. Do you guys always notice it?
Yeah. So there's a sensor inside. So
okay, there's a sensor, you understand? And that's what we are talking about, the trigger. So once you put your ATM, and it trigger that sensor, then the sensor pick your card in. Then once you pick your card in, if this chips is not good, it returns it immediately. If the chips is good, then it processes it. So that accepting card is event-driven. Daytime does not have a power to be accepting all the card that is passing all across. The only card that daytime can accept is the one that is being slotted in, and that's what we call it event-driven. Daytime has capacity to accept card, but it cannot accept card if it is not triggered. If we didn't try to slot it into the card slot. Do you get it now? And that is why we call it event-driven. The event is slotting the card into the card slot. That's the event.
Mr. P, let me see this example.
Oh goodness, you can unmute yourself, please.
Okay, so I wanted to say, there's an example that came to my mind. Let me see if it resonates with what you are saying. So one event is, for example, when you're driving and you smash and you hit something, and then the car, the airbag comes up. That's an example, right?
Yes. So that's an example.
Okay.
When you are driving the car and the car hits something, it's an event that happened. So maybe the car crashed into a building or the car hit an oncoming vehicle. Immediately that event happened. That event triggers something. It triggers something that released the airbags. And that's what we call event-driven requirement. Okay? So these are various functional requirements that is possible when you're working and documenting your requirement. Okay, so the next one is what we call optional feature requirements. You can see this optional feature requirement is talking about when the requirement is like an option. It's not like the main thing. It's like an option. Look at the example we have here. Say, where the control system includes an overspeed protection function. The control system shall test the availability of the overspeed protection function before aircraft dispatch. So this always happens when you are building a software that they may install it into system that may not have all the functions, but those functions are not main. They are not main features. And that's why, so this place is, so the optional event is the overspeed protection function. It's an option, it's not a must. So it's saying that when you install this aircraft system software and the aircraft has an overspeed protection function, then the control system should test the availability of that protection system. But if it doesn't have the overspeed protection function, then it's all good. It won't make any test. Okay? And that's what we call the optional feature requirements. It's when you are documenting requirement and you want to cater for optional features, you just need to document them in that way. And that's what we call the optional features requirement. Then another one we have is unwanted behavior requirements. We can see if the computed airspeed is unavailable, then the control system shall use model airspeed. So this is talking about when something more like a mitigation plan requirement. What happens when something is not available? What do you want the system to do in terms of risk, in terms of for example, you have some system, they will build them in that once maybe the payment gateway is compromised, then the whole system should shut down. And I know some of us have been familiar with that kind of system, that once you compromise one, immediately it will trigger the whole system. those ones will be functioning very well, but the whole system will quickly shut down. That's an action. So, but those are kind of requirements that we call them unwanted behavior requirement. Unwanted behavior requirement. For example, if some of us are using maybe like Barclay mobile app, once you try to make transfer of about certain amounts and you make error the first time with your PIN, so the second time, you will not just, the system can log out of all the Barclay app and you will not have access to the app. You will not have, you have to call them. You won't be able to log into the app again. You won't have access to your bank account. They will send you an email instantly that you need to call, and you just have to call them before they give you access back. So those kind of requirements are what we call unwanted behavior requirements. So they build them as a mitigation plan to ensure that the system is not compromised, and many times to cater for unwanted, unforeseen circumstances, things that they didn't plan, things that were not expected. Because guys, we'll be working on systems, and sometimes, because of how critical or how sensitive a software may be, they may need to build some form of unwanted requirements. So these are requirements will only be activated when something goes wrong. When something goes wrong, and when it's something that was not expected, a situation that was not foreseen, unforeseen circumstances. So once those unforeseen circumstances happen, then they expect the requirement to kick in. So when, and these are part of functional requirements. It's part of functional requirement, but they are classified as unwanted behavior requirements. Okay. Also, we have the last one, which we call complex requirements. So these are requirements majorly that they entail. These are not ideal requirements, because as much as possible, requirements are meant to be simple and concise. But because of some reasons, there's no way you can simplify it. Do you guys believe that there can be a situation like that? Do you agree with me? Goodness, do you agree with me? Goodness and Yan, do you agree with me that there may be a situation where you cannot really simplify a complex requirement?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yes. So on some, on some few occasions, the idea is for you to simplify your requirement, make it concise. But on some few occasions, especially when you're working on some complex system, what you call simple may really be complex. Let's look at this example we have here. It says, while the aircraft is on the ground, when reverse thrust is commanded, the control system shall enable deployment of the thrust reverser. So you guys can see the various action that needs to take place. The first thing, while the aircraft is on the ground. So they could not say, oh, while the aircraft is on the ground, the system shall enable deployment of the thrust reverser. No, that will not be correct, because another action needs to take place, which is when the thrust reverse is commanded. So we can see the complexity involved. So the truth is, the aircraft on the ground is a requirement. The reverse thrust being commanded is a requirement. Then we can see the real function. The real function is enabling deployment of a thrust reverser. So we can see sometimes requirements can be complex in terms of actions, but ultimately, when you look at all of these requirement example that we've been looking at, you can see the way they conform with the attributes of a good requirement.
Excuse me, can we say the airbag as an instance when it comes to this complex requirements? the airbags from cars.
Explain.
Like when there's an accident and then the airbag, I don't know, kind of protects the driver.
Okay.
Is it an instance, like, does it sort of,
When the airbag, to me, it's an event. Okay. The airbag is an event because once there's a collision, that collision triggers the release of the airbag. Being on the ground of this aircraft does not trigger the reverse thrust to be commanded. The reverse thrust has to be commanded by the pilots, and the plane has to be on ground by action, by events. So it is event-driven, and yet it is an action one. Okay? So, but the airbag is purely event-driven. Once there's a collision, the driver will not do anything else. Once there's a collision to a particular magnitude, the system automatically releases the airbag. So, goodness, do you get it now? So it is not complex. Okay? It is
okay, please,
event-driven.
can you help us with another instance of these complex requirements that will maybe help with understanding, because I don't know, I'm not really getting it.
Okay. Do you normally watch people that do car race? Are you familiar with car race like Fast and Furious 5, 6, 7, Fast and Furious? Are you familiar? Okay, so when you want to make the car to turn on a same spot, the driver has to do what? He has to press acceleration, turn the steering, and hold the brake all at the same time. And that is when the car can twist. So when you want to write that kind of requirement, it's complex because the driver has to do what? He press the brake, he holds he turn the steering, and also accelerate. So then you can see the way the car will skid. Then it will turn a 360. You see, that is a kind of a complex requirement. I hope it's still not complex. Goodness.
Mr. P, let me ask a question. Maybe this might help goodness. So if you're doing like a card transaction.
My network kind of.
Okay. Patrick, go ahead.
Okay, so if you do a card transaction, okay, maybe you want to buy something online, okay, so you choose the product, you put in your card details. When you put in your card details, it would ask you to put a PIN. It will ask you to put the CVV at the back. Once you put it, it triggers another window that asks you for either an one-time password or for you to put your internet PIN. When you now put your internet PIN, it will go and check whether that product is a permissible product on your card before it can now debit your account. Is that a complex requirement? Do you understand what I'm saying? Did you hear me, Mr. P?
Yeah, I heard you, but I'm thinking there's a lot of series of action that happens at the same time. Okay, so many times we document those requirements the way you've mentioned them separately. You understand? Like we document requirement about there's a requirement for accepting the card PIN because it follows a different authentication. PIN authentication is different. So so because they are not following the same chain. Okay. So another complex requirement that I can think of is look at our phone. when you have like your Samsung Pass on, you know, and once you put your biometric, it opens your phone and it can give you access to all your app. Especially when you are using, so all you need is you register your face in your app once time in your biometrics, and you can use that authentication for multiple things. So they build in such a way that once this authentication is done, it opens, especially in the office, it opens all your office app, it opens all of them at the same time. And all of these different systems, they have different authentication that they could have been asked, but because they've been integrated into the authentication platform. So that's like a complex requirement that once this authentication platform authenticates you, it gives you access to all others, okay? And that's just the idea about complex requirements. So there are requirements that talks about when two different events has to take place at the same time, you know, for something to happen. And these two events, they are not depending on themselves. Okay? The two events are not depending on themselves, but they just need to take place for an event to happen. And that's why we call them complex requirements. Okay?
Sorry, Mr.
So, yeah, go ahead, please.
Let me give an example to see if I also understand what you said. For example, there's one thing that came to my mind. If you want to do is a phone screenshot, you know, you have to hold the power button and the lower button at the same time, then you can get a screenshot. So that means multiple things happening simultaneously. If these two things or three things happen simultaneously, then this is what happened. I guess that's what it means, right?
Yes. You know, the power button has its own function.
Yes.
And the volume
lower
key
volume
has its own function. But by the time you hold the two together, then another function is that. Okay? And that's like a perfect example of complex requirements. If you will agree with me, even in practice, it is complex. Many times we struggle. Sometimes you have to be using your two hands just to achieve it. Okay? And that's an example of a complex requirement. Goodness, are we good?
Yes, we're good. It's way clearer now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Uju, your hand is up.
And I'll place for every all people like friends get
Guys, is it my network? I'm not hearing Uju very well.
It's a network.
I think it's I'm not here. It might be mine. Sorry.
Yeah,
No.
Uju, I mean, we can't hear you well. Your network is breaking. Okay. Goodness, Okafor.
So Uju, you can type it
Yes.
if your network is bad. The chat box.
Yeah,
when
you can use
you
the chat
resolve
box.
it.
Okay, I think she's typing now. So while she's at it, this optional feature requirement. I need another example to really understand it. This optional feature, because the thing I'm reading here, I don't really understand the aircraft story per se.
Optional feature requirement is just talking about you having a requirement that is based on available options. Like, okay, look at what the example they give here. Sometimes you build a software to foresee, I mean, to have like to foresee, I mean, the features of the system. So, for example, you may have a software for example, you may have a software for, for your phone, and they build it in the phone that when they install this software into a phone that has biometrics, that has fingerprint features, then the software should enable authentication into the phone through biometrics. But when you install the phone into a system, but when you install the software into a phone that does not have biometrics, then the software should allow the normal login, which is username and password. So that's what we call optional features. When the requirement is focusing on getting the best of the available features in a system. So, and it has to be built in from the start. Do you understand it now, goodness? Like,
Yes, I do.
if you install the software into a phone that does not have biometrics, the phone will still work, the software will work well, maximum. But when you install the same software, the same version, into a phone that has biometrics functionalities, then the software will enable authentication through the biometrics. Okay, so let's look at the question of Uju. She's asking, for writing a functional requirement for a product, must you have all of these features? The answer is no. And I've told you from the beginning that this thing I'm telling you, they are just for theory, it's for academic. But for us in ATC, we believe it is good for you to understand, the various type and example for functional requirements you can meet. So that by the time you are writing it, you will not be having difficulties in thinking, oh, could this be non-functional? Could this be functional? Because you are seeing the various types, the various example of a functional requirement, and you will have an enlarged mind, when you are documenting functional requirement. And that is just the example where we are bringing you all of these classes and examples to you. If you want to understand the scope of functional requirement, that functional requirement can be what? Ubiquitous requirements, which is a continuous actions, can also be state-driven, can be event-driven, can be optional features requirement, can be unwanted behavior requirement, and can be complex requirements, okay? So those are the various examples of functional requirements. Any question from anyone? Before we proceed. For me, so can I be confident that you know functional and non-functional requirement very well now?
Yes, but we have not spoken about the examples of non-functional, but I'm confident.
We did non-functional requirements yesterday.
I was
Okay,
partially.
yes. Yes. Dari, can I be confident that you know functional and non-functional requirements now?
All right. To understand, I don't know what happened. I got cut off at a point, but I don't just want to drag us back. I will listen to the recording of this part and I'll be fine. So I just log in again, not quite long.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lekon, Olalekon, can I be confident that you know functional and non-functional requirements now?
50%.
60%, right?
50%.
50%. Okay. By the time you go over it, you will get it more. Okay. So let's proceed. As much as possible, I want you to keep holding your confidence and that you have that business analyst is not a difficult terrain. As you can see that it has been fun. We've been taking it slowly and gently, and we want to go further. understood the fact that we've talked about requirement, functional and non-functional requirements. Why are you guys holding your breath? You people should calm down. Guys, relax. We are just going a little bit further, okay? So, we are going into elicitation, okay? And when you hear elicitation, so my first question to you will be, what comes to your mind about elicitation? We've mentioned elicitation in the course of this course. So what comes to your mind when you hear elicitation? Anybody?
The act of maybe gathering information or requirement.
Okay. The act of, can you come again?
Gathering requirement.
Okay, the act of gathering requirements. Okay. Any other person?
All right. I think in one of the classes, you made mention of using the word draw, like drawing out, and that would be the most appropriate word to be used.
Yes. So thank you. So elicitation is the act of squeezing out information. Is, we don't like to use the word gather, because if you gather something, it means it is on the surface and you just gather them together. No, elicitation entails more. It's about you squeezing out information, squeezing out requirements from your stakeholders. Remember, we already know the sources of requirements: clients, interfacing systems, existing documentations, computing systems, and all. Those are the sources of requirement. And you already know what are requirements. So elicitation is just that act of you digging out this requirement from all the requirement sources. And that is what elicitation is all about. Is that act of you digging out requirements from all the requirement sources that we've discussed. And when we are looking at elicitation, for us in business analysis, it would be wrong for you to say, oh, I gather requirements, because requirements are not on the surface. If they're on the surface, everybody will gather them. But they are not on the surface. But what you do is you elicit requirements. That is, you dig them out. You dig them out, you squeeze them out with your skills as a BA. Okay. And now, when you are looking at elicitation, we have some major things that you need to look into. Okay. We have some tasks in elicitation. So number one task is you need to prepare. I know by now we should get familiar with the act of planning before you set out. So you're on a project, right? Remember the knowledge area where we are, which is elicitation, requirement elicitation, and collaboration, which happens at the analysis phase. I'm trying to help us join the knowledge area together. You are the analysis phase. You have the project objective, you have the project initiation document, and you are the BA, you plan your work. But at this stage of analysis phase, what you need to do is you need to draw out those requirements, from the stakeholder. When the stakeholders are, they just give you like an overview. So what is on the requirement on the project initiation document, they're like high level requirements, like this business requirement and stakeholders requirement. But now you're at the analysis phase. You need to document the solution requirement, which are the functional and non-functional requirement. And how will you go ahead documenting this functional and non-functional requirement? It is through elicitation. Elicitation is that act of you drawing out those requirements, taking them out from the stakeholder. And the first thing you need to do when you are doing elicitation is to do what? Is to prepare for elicitation. So you prepare for elicitation. The next thing you need to do what? Is to conduct elicitation. You prepare, you conduct, and the next thing you do is you document your elicitation output. And the last thing is you do what? You confirm your elicitation results. I want to remind us one thing. You as a BA, you don't create requirements, you elicit requirements. So when so at the end of your elicitation, there's a need for you to do what? You confirm your elicitation result with the stakeholders. Because the stakeholders ultimately, remember that diagram we watched, they are the owner of the needs. So all you are doing is you are helping them to properly define their needs. And that is requirement. So at the end of the day, you will not take over their rights. So no matter what you do as a BA, always know that you need to recourse back to the stakeholders, especially once you are producing an output. Okay? So when you're eliciting requirements, things you need to know is 4 major tasks as a BA. The first one is you prepare. The second one is you conduct, which is you execute it. The third one is you document it. And the last one is you confirm elicitation results. Okay? So when we talk about prepare for elicitation, what are those things that we are talking about? We are talking about you planning your resources, setting ground rules, informing the appropriate people, and also what? Setting out the appropriate process. Are you with me? The first thing you do what? Is to plan the resources. And when we talk about resources you are planning for the people, the facility, the equipment. These resources you are planning, it entails, for example, we will soon be talking about elicitation techniques. You know, you can use different elicitation techniques. So depending on the elicitation techniques that you choose to use, then we define how you will plan for elicitation. Okay? So we'll soon be talking about the different elicitation techniques that is possible. But for now, one thing I want you to know is you plan. And when you are planning, when you are preparing for elicitation, you plan the people. If you will need a secretary, you plan for the secretary. If you want to engage maybe end users stakeholder group of like 50, you book for the all. It is not the project manager that is responsible for elicitation workshop or elicitation events. It is a BA that you are solely responsible for elicitation events. So you need to plan, and this is where your skills of planning that we know you have has to be exhibited. So you need to do a plan for people, plan the facility, and also the equipment. If you'll be talking to over 100 end users group, you need to plan for projector, plan for public address system, and all. So as a BA, right there on your desk, you are the master planner of your work. So sometimes don't be thinking, it's not about you talking or engaging. It's about you do some desk work to make sure that the few times you show up there, you are out there to perform and to shine. So, and that's why you need to do a lot of your desk work. So these are part of those desk work that BA needs to do. You need to do what? You need to plan your resources. Another thing you also need to take into consideration when you are preparing for elicitation is to set ground rules. So, and when we look at ground rules, depending for events-based elicitation, you need to set ground rules. If you are doing questionnaire as a technique for your elicitation, you may not need any ground rule because you are not engaging anybody. You may just print your questionnaires according to, your rules may just be, it must be according, you must protect people's data and all. But when you're organizing event-based, like brainstorming sections, focus group discussions, interview, observation, prototyping, ground rules must be established and communicated. As you are I always want you to know yourself as a BA that when it comes to communication, you, as much as possible, you try to plan for everything. You may not be an oratory person. You may not be somebody that is highly vocal, but you are someone that pay attention to details. You are someone that plan. So when it comes to preparing for elicitation, the first thing is to plan your resources. Then the next thing you do is, if it's an event based, you plan, you set the ground rules right from the beginning. Before the event, you set the ground rules. Then another thing you also do when you are preparing is inform. You notify appropriate stakeholders of the plan. You notify appropriate stakeholders of the plan. You notify people that are involved. You give them notice. You are planning a workshop. You are not expected to be giving them 2 days notice. No, you give them appropriate notice. You notify appropriate stakeholder of the plan. You carry them along. Many times, if you want to set up meetings, you send an agenda with your meeting invite for them to know. You give them enough. Remember, you'll be planning all your work at the point of initiation already. You must have planned your activities in your work breakdown structure. You have planned your activity. What you are doing at this analysis phase is you are executing. Most of this plan, you have planned it before in your work breakdown structure, which is prepare for elicitation. If you remember the work breakdown structure that we use, you see some of these things there. Prepare for elicitation and all. But when you get to analysis, you now start executing all your plan. Okay? So the next thing you also do when you are preparing for elicitation is to agree on process. Agree on communication process, majorly. Agree. How do you want us to be communicating? Remember, you may not know these stakeholders before. You are just new on the project. You get their contact from the project information document and from your research, and you establish conversation with them. You need to agree, set up the process for communication and feedback. From the very beginning, agree on agree on the mechanism for verifying and signing off on elicited results. Is it going to be at the beginning or during one specific phase? You need to agree. So you don't leave anything to assumption. It can be your first meeting with them, that you just agree with them and you document it. That, okay, I'm going to be meeting with you every 2 weeks, or communications on this project will be via email, or this is where the approval have to be coming from, and all. You need to agree with them so that everybody will be on the same page with you. Are we together?
Yes, we are, but Mr. Peter, please let me ask you. When we did the stakeholder analysis, we also discussed means of communication. Are we to kind of bring that back to this preparing for elicitation? Is it a different kind of communication process?
No. But when you are doing stakeholder analysis, remember that is pre-project. You may not be involved with stakeholder analysis, okay? And I told you that once the business case has been developed, everything about stakeholders analysis ascended. Do you understand it? So, and I told you that assume you are a new BA. Communication skill is something that BA must have. So if you are working on stakeholder, if you are carrying out stakeholder analysis, you engage your communication skill. And now you're a project-based BA. We are asking you where your communication skill, okay? When you are planning for elicitation, you plan to conduct elicitation. That in your process of planning when you want to conduct elicitation, the first thing you do is you prepare for elicitation. And while you are preparing for elicitation, you look into the resources, you plan the resources, you plan the ground rules, you inform those, you communicate with those people that are necessary, you notify all the appropriate stakeholders, and you set up process and mechanism for verify and sign up. Oh, do you want me to always send an email to you, or you will log on to our platform, you know, or you just do an electronic sign up, or you want me to deliver a hard copy to your office and all. So you set everything up at this stage, and that's what we are talking about. So it's, if you can talk yesterday during stakeholder analysis, you can still talk today during requirement, during elicitation. It's not, it doesn't affect themselves. Okay, are we good?
So Mr. P, sorry. So just to clarify, if at the pre-project, okay, stage, it's like once you finish that particular stage, you just take it out. Okay, fine. Look, that stage is done. So when you start now on this analysis stage, it's like you're not going back to come and say, okay, fine, because I've done communication or whatever. That stage is gone. So this one is a entirely new stage on its own, new phase on its own, and you treat it as separate, Abby?
Yes.
Okay.
And in practice, okay, it's because you guys are doing training. That's why we are in practice. I think I told you, when you get the job, you may not even, it depends on the stage of the project that you're working. And again, you may even get a job and be working as part of a business as usual, maybe system improvement or continuous enhancement, you know, in that kind of case, you may not be doing strategy analysis and stuff like that. Okay. So I don't want you guys to mix it up. Just know, strategy analysis, once you produce business case, you've done with that task. And when you get on a project, you're a business analyst for a project, then that's what we are focusing on now. Now we are done with you being a business analysis at conception phase, which is pre-project. We are done. Okay, what we are focusing on is how you can excel as a business analyst on the project. And that we are starting from initiation. And we've talked about initiation is at the point of initiation, when they are initiating projects, assume, believe that you are not the one that work on the strategy analysis side. So you are not the one that approach business case. So when they are doing initiation phase, what are you expected to do? Is you do what's doing your business analysis planning and monitoring. Okay, where you start planning your activities, you know, you set your, you do your business analysis planning, you conduct your stakeholder analysis, you know, you plan your business analysis approach, you know, you do your business analysis activities planning, where you develop work breakdown structure and the likes. Okay, so, and that is you working administration stage. Now you are project based. So we are not saying that once it is analysis phase, what's expected of you as a BA is requirement elicitation and collaboration. That's one of those things expected of you. And we are saying, what is elicitation? We are just saying elicitation is that act, you know, of you digging out requirements, choosing out requirements, you know, from the stakeholder. And we're saying, what are requirements in this stage? We are referring to the solution requirements, which are functional and non-functional requirements. So we are not saying, what we are saying is, at this phase of analysis, your task as a BA is to dig out requirements, you know, and that act of digging out requirement is what we call elicitation. Now, when we say elicitation, we're saying for you to successfully, you know, for you to successful at carrying out elicitation, you must do what? We have some major tasks that has to be done. So the first task is you need to prepare for elicitation. Remember, he who fails to plan is planning to fail. So, and when you hear about preparing for something, majorly he knows that when you are developing your WBS, you must have prepared. These are some of those things that you must have done, but we are just calling your attention to that. When you are doing your elicitation, you must have prepared for elicitation. Remember, it's dynamics. Nobody will police you. Whether you prepare for elicitation before, but we know, and we are telling you, before you can conduct elicitation successfully, you need to prepare for elicitation. Then, after preparing for elicitation, you need to do what? You now need to conduct the elicitation. Then after conducting the elicitation, you now need to do what? document the elicitation output. And after documenting the elicitation output, you now need to do what? Confirm the elicitation results. These are the various tasks that is embedded in the act of elicitation for you as a BA. So when you're on a project and you're conducting elicitation, what we are saying is, or what you are telling us is, for me to successfully conduct elicitation process, I must have done what? Prepare for the elicitation, conduct the elicitation itself, document the elicitation output. And again, the next thing is doing what? Is confirm the elicitation result with the stakeholder. And that is me doing elicitation. Now, what we are not doing is one by one, we are now looking at those tasks. When we say prepare for elicitation, what do we mean? And we are telling you, and I'm happy to tell you, preparing for elicitation means, number one, plan your resources. Number two, set ground rules. And when we say plan your resources, we are talking about the people you will need for elicitation, the facility you will need for elicitation, and the equipment you're going to need for the elicitation. You need to do what? You need to plan it. Then number two, set ground rules, especially in this digital age, that sometimes you'll be doing a lot of virtual elicitation techniques and all. So you need to do what? Set ground rules. And in setting ground rules, so you need to do it before the elicitation itself. You have to communicate it ahead, of the elicitation itself. Then the next activities that is under preparing for elicitation is inform. You have to notify all appropriate stakeholder of your plan. Majorly, you need to tell them like your agenda. And that is it. So the last one here is process. Agree with the stakeholders on the form and frequency of feedback during the elicitation process. Guys, let me tell you, elicitation process can take 3 months. It can take much more, depending on the magnitude of the project. So, and you need to plan this communication process. You need to plan this process. You need to plan, how are they going to sign off my requirements? How are they going to be signing off on the elicitation output? So these are all of those things you need to plan when you are preparing for elicitation. Are we together?
Yeah, Mr. P, sorry, just something that's just going through my head. So 2 questions. So the first one is, I don't know whether I'm jumping the gun here. If you can help us out with maybe like 1 ground rule you can set or 2 ground rules you can set. Then the second one is just clarification. So at this particular point on the analysis stage where you are preparing for elicitation, what you are trying to gather here is the solution requirement, Abi, not business or stakeholder. The solution, Abi?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, so ground rules are very simple. So you can do, maybe you are doing a virtual workshop and you can set the rules like, in this workshop, you just display it. In this workshop, you cannot talk unless you raise your hand, no video and all. So those are ground rules and they are simple as that. Because elicitation is an event, okay, depending on the techniques. Maybe you want to conduct interview. Interview is an elicitation technique, for example, and you can tell your interview people you are interviewing that, during the course of our interviews, guys, please, you will not be allowed to pick a call. So if the interview is for 30 minutes, you will not be allowed to pick a call. That's a rule. They must agree. So when you are, for example, maybe you are holding a focus group discussion that is physical, you can set them a ground rule that, during this our physical workshop, your phones are not expected to ring. So they are very simple, but they are very important rules. And they are important because as a business analyst, you are dealing with powerful people. You are dealing with stakeholders. So as much as possible, you don't want anything to go wrong in your course of engaging with them, so that it will not compromise the quality of requirement you are gathering. You will not like the emotions of your stakeholders to be reflected in the output of what you are gathering. So as much as possible, you set those ground rules in place to make them comfortable and to also ensure you as the BA, you are at your best. Are we together?
Yeah.
Any question from anyone? Any question from anyone? So the next thing is, when you're also preparing for your elicitation, you must also do what? Take into cognizance how you will track information. How you will track information, okay? So tracking here is talking about, one thing is important here is how you will guide against scope creeping. Can anybody tell us what is scope creep? What do you understand by scope creep? Anyone?
Is it expanding the scope, that is like changes continuous or uncontrolled growth in a project scope? That's for the thing to just continue to increase more and more and more and more. I don't know if that's it.
Okay, thank you for trying. Any other person? Any other person?
I'm guessing maybe it has to do with extraneous variables.
What do you say?
I said I'm guessing it has to do with extraneous variables.
Okay, external variables. Okay. Any other person? Any other person? Taiwo, Richard, for me, Bamdele.
I think it has to do with maybe progression of the progress. I mean, of the project, like something you cannot control.
Okay. Any other contribution?
Okay, I think maybe when you've agreed, so something just came to mind, maybe when you've agreed on a scope or something like that. So sorry, you want to agree on a scope so that not after you now agree, then you will now leave room for the scope for somebody else to come and add something to it. You understand? And it's not part of what you agreed upon. So it's just to agree and make sure that they don't expand it arbitrarily.
Okay. So when you hear scope creep, just know that you are guiding against distraction, diversion, and alterations. Okay? So you are guiding against distractions. Because when you are conducting elicitation, has anybody been in this position when you want to have a meeting with someone, you have your agenda in your mind, and when you start conversing, the person take you to another conversation entirely, and that's why you spend your whole time discussing? Has anybody experienced it before? Has anybody experienced that before? When you have a plan to meet
Yes, I
someone,
have. I have.
okay? Bamdele, have you experienced it before? When you have a plan to meet somebody, you know what you want to discuss, but immediately you call the person, you just ended up talking about a lot of things that you don't plan for. Bamdele, have you experienced that before? For me, have you experienced it before?
Yes, yeah.
Bamdele, have you experienced it before?
Yes.
Yes. So, and what you guys experience, what we call scope creep, it happens a lot because you are a business analyst and you are dealing with stakeholders. So many times when you engage them, remember these stakeholders, they have their own agenda, they have their own interests and all. So when you engage them, as much as possible, they are the stakeholders, but you need to guide against them, distracting you, from derailing you, from diverting your attention to something else that is outside the scope of the project. Remember, the project initiation document that you have at the initiation phase already define the scope of the project, define what is out of scope and what is in scope. So you need to, as you are planning your elicitation, you need to be able to do what? Guide against it. Okay? You need to be able to do what? Guide against it. And also, at each time, do what? Trace back the requirements to the business goal objectives. When you have conversations, when you conduct elicitation, because the stakeholders will talk about a lot of things. Okay, so when they are talking, so when you are conducting elicitation, so when you are conducting elicitation, you must be able to do what? Guide against scope creeping. You must be able to guide against scope creeping when you are conducting elicitation. Okay, so when you are conducting elicitation, you must be able to guide against scope creeping. It is very important because when you engage and you're in a focus group discussion, for example, you call people that are maybe you want to develop a software for, for some, you want to develop a software for immigrants and you gather, a workshop for immigrants in UK. And in the workshop, people come together, Nigerians. And before you know, they started discussing about political happenings in Nigeria. That is not a purpose. And remember, these are stakeholders. So you must have that skills to make sure that you guide against scope creeping. And how do you do that? Is by ensuring that you follow the agenda of the day. You have your agenda, topics that have been drafted out for conversations. You've already prepared. You have it drafted out. So in that case, you make sure you follow it. You don't allow them to hijack your events. And as they are having conversations, you must be having a mental trace of the conversations to see that it's aligning with the project objective. And project objectives are not so many, so it's not something so difficult. Once you see some conversations that are derailing, you need to call them back and guide them, okay? And that is one. Another thing you need to know when you are conducting elicitation is you need to be able to document metrics, indices, informations that are being pushed out. For example, it is in the course of your elicitation that you will know what are the musts, what are the should have, what are the could have of a requirement. Because the way the stakeholder are saying it, you must be able to know the attributes of those requirements. It's very important. So guys, you may be thinking it's not something so difficult. That's why in the world of today, you are allowed to record your elicitation workshop so that you can listen to it over and over again for you to get the right information out of it. So when you are conducting elicitation, guys, note, you must be able to do what? Track the requirements to make sure that it's in scope and you guide against scope creeping. The next thing is understand the metrics. Document the metrics. These are attributes, such as the requirement source, the value, the priority, which will aid you in managing each requirement throughout a life cycle. Remember, this elicitation is when you are having is the primary source of requirements. Remember, we say elicitation is you digging it out. So you will still go ahead and refine it. You will still go ahead and analyze it. You will still go ahead and do a lot of requirement processing and engineering, which we will talk about. But at this point of digging out this requirement, you must be able to maintain the originality of informations without compromise. And in doing so, you must be able to do what? Document attributes. The stakeholder stakeholders, they have a lot of information, but as much as possible, you capture those informations and you document them. Sometimes it may take time. Elicitation is not a process where you carry out in a haste. In some major project, guys, they can be doing elicitation for 1 year. A project that will span for like 5 years, they can use a whole year to focus on doing elicitation. Why? Because they must capture the requirement in its entity, in its original form, documenting the various attributes that is important. So these are what you do during elicitation. Another one is, I don't want you guys to be confused. When you see metrics here, so it's talking about the requirement. But when you see attributes here, it's talking about the elicitation participants. And it's also talking about the time spent. It's talking about the features of elicitation. Why this one is basically talking about the requirement itself. So when you see metrics, these are what you do when you are conducting elicitation. The first thing, when you are conducting elicitation, you must be able to do what? Track, guide against scope creep. Make sure that the conversation you are having is focused. If you are using questionnaire to do your elicitation, make sure that the questions that you have been asking are being developed, they are focused, are in scope. Now, when you are also doing it, put metrics, identify the metrics, and document them. So you document the requirement attributes, such as what is the source, what is the value the requirement is placing on it. In a way, if you are engaging a stakeholder and they keep saying, oh, this must be done, this has cost us a lot, you must find a way to document it. And so the stakeholder emphasize on the need to do this. Remember, that is the source of your requirements. Okay. And now the last one is attributes. You want continuous improvement. So you must be able to do what? Track the elicitation participants so that you can see the quality. You can gauge it. Okay, when I do elicitation for this particular system, these are the set of participants that attended. And at the end of the day, you can use as a basis for your future engagement. And you can also remember that when you are doing work breakdown structure, we talk about estimating your time frame. When you document attribute of elicitation, you document the features of elicitation, that will serve you the basis for you to predict how long a future project, how long elicitation will take you in a future project. So you document those attributes, the time spent, how many stakeholders did you involve, did you get to travel? Those are little minute details, but you need to document them because it is important for you to do that in the course of your work. Okay? Are we together? So the next topic we'll be looking at are the various elicitation techniques. But before we go, I want to ask us if we have any question. Any question from anyone? Are we together? Are we good? Do we understand what elicitation is all about now before we move on to elicitation techniques? I'm not getting any voices. You guys are quiet on me again.
Please, can you explain the metrics once again, please?
Okay. Metrics again.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lekon, when you are conducting your elicitation, okay, so there are levels of details that you need to consider when you are conducting your elicitation. And that is what this is talking about, that when you are conducting elicitation, there are level of details that needs to be considered. Okay. I'm coming. Give me 5 minutes. Just okay. There's an error on that slide. So I got a new slide and I think I need to put it. Okay. So remember, you are done preparing your elicitation. And what you are doing now is doing what? Is to conduct elicitation. So for you to conduct elicitation, there are some levels of details that you need to consider. And we say the first level of details you need to consider is what we call tracking details. So tracking details are to help you ensure that during the course of elicitation, you are in scope. You do not allow any form of gyration, distraction, diversion by the stakeholders, because it has been discovered it is humanly possible for you to engage stakeholders. They will want to gyrate, but for example, you have only 10 minutes to talk with maybe a governor. The governor may be so relaxed, he knows you have 10 minutes with you, but we still want to talk a lot about other things. You will be the one to make sure that you keep them in scope. It is your work to do. And that's what we talk about tracking. Now, attributes is when you are documenting your elicitations. We are saying that you don't lose out on some important parameters. you don't lose out on some important parameters that you can use to be able to do what? To define and manage your requirements in the requirement lifecycle. That there's some metrics, attributes that you don't, there's some attribute that you don't lose out when you are documenting your requirement. So that's the way listing the requirement is in documenting requirement attributes such as requirement source, value, priority. We aid in managing each requirement throughout its life cycle. So, and this is very important. So attributes, while documenting it, the attribute of the requirements, you need to document them. The attributes of the requirements, you need to document them. So attribute of the requirements, such as the requirement source, the value, like what is the value of the requirement? What is the impact? Then the priority. So all of these attributes, in the course of engaging the stakeholder, they will be mentioning some of these attributes. As much as possible, you need to document them. Don't neglect such informations, okay? And that is attributes. So the last one that you need to also keep an eye on is what we call metrics. So these metrics are just about like tracking the number of illustration participants that you have, more like the metrics of the events, looking at the time spent, and it is to help you for future planning. So that when next you are documenting your work breakdown, you can really predict that when I did my first project, I spent 5 days eliciting requirements from 100 stakeholders. So on this my new project, I'm going to have like 200 stakeholders. How many days am I likely going to spend? So those are what the metrics are all about. So this is more like the event metrics, okay? Event metrics, and sometimes also, and then this one we are talking about the requirement attribute really. And this is really us talking about tracking of the requirement. So the earlier slides, the admin guys really give me a mix-up. So, but they just send this to me now. And I think we need to take note of that. Okay? Does it make more sense now?
Okay, yeah, it does. I was about to even ask the question, whether you've corrected it now, because I looked at before and it was the inverse.
Yes.
Where attribute is now was where matrix was before.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that earlier slide, you can notice there's a lot of error on that slide. Even the title of the slide was still prepare for illustration. I was like, no, this is not. I think you see the way I was using my hand to cancel it.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think this is the right one. Okay. Now I use this slide a lot, so sometimes maybe the way they revise it, so maybe they just admin guys do a lot of things. So yeah, so are we good now? Lekon,
Yes,
have you understand it now? So all of these are what you look out for when you are conducting elicitation. Remember, you prepare for elicitation. When you are preparing, you look at the resources, you look at the informing them, you look at resources, you look at planning for facility, people, and all. But now, when you are conducting it, so these are what you will be looking out for to ensure that your conversations are in scope, to ensure that all the details, requirement details, are not lost in the course of documentation. Sometimes you engage in a long conversation, maybe for like 1 hour for 5 days workshop, you may get tired. But that's why you need to document those requirement attributes. And the metrics is about the events. Okay, how many stakeholders did I engage in 5 days, just for you to be able to do what? Improve on yourself and plan for your future. Okay, and that is what we are talking about. Do we understand it now? So today we've been able to look into elicitation as an act of screening out, taking out the requirement from stakeholders. And we are saying it, what are the 4 major tasks in elicitation? The first one is you prepare for elicitation. The second one is you do what? You conduct elicitation itself. The third one is you document your elicitation result. While the fourth one is you confirm your elicitation result. So, and when we are talking about preparing for elicitation, the number one thing you do is you plan for your resources, you plan for the ground rules. So, when you are looking at resources, we talk about the people. If you need a secretary, if you need usher, if you need you plan for them. Then you plan for facilities. If you need a public address system, you need a PowerPoint projector and all, you plan. And also the equipment, and this, so maybe you need a mirror, collaborative tools and all, you plan all of this. And when then next thing you also plan is the ground rules. You agree with the stakeholder, what should be your ground rule? If it is going to be, especially for events-based elicitations, you agree on the ground rules. Then the next thing, which is very important, when you are doing your planning, you do what? You inform all appropriate stakeholders, and that is inform. Then the last thing is when you are preparing for elicitation is you do what? You agree on the form and frequency of feedback. That's what we call process. You agree on the process. What would be the process of sign-off? Will you be signing off so you agree on all of this from the beginning? Are we going to be meeting every 2 weeks? Am I going to come to your office to have the meeting? Can I just send my questions to you via email and all? So you agree, you plan all of this when you are preparing for elicitation. And when you now start conducting the elicitation, we are saying that there are level of details that you need to consider. Number one details level is details that enable you to track, that ensure that you can track the requirement to make sure that the requirement is in scope and not out of scope. And you guide against scope creeping, and also you ensure that you can trace the requirement back. Get enough details that will make you to trace the requirement back to the project objective, and all, which will later help you when you're validating requirements if it is in scope or out of scope. So if you don't get enough details that attach the requirement back to the project objective, if you don't get enough details, that make you know that this requirement is in scope, if you don't get enough data that makes you to see, that this requirement is out of scope, you will not be able to validate requirements at the end of the day. Maybe you can't join it, and that's that will be your aim. When you engage stakeholders, you'll be able to do what? Track requirements, get those tracking details from them that will enable you to do what? To trace requirements back to business goals and objectives. Remember, business goals and objectives, that will be in the business case and in project initiation documents, and then it will help you to validate whether a requirement should be included or not. If you don't have enough details, and then you may be scared that, I don't know if this is involved or not. But when you're engaging them in the course of the conduct elicitation and you ask them those details, it will really help you, to be able to know whether a requirement is actually in scope or out of scope. Those are some of those things that you will put your heart to when you are conducting elicitation. Another thing we expected you to put your heart to when you are conducting elicitation is the requirement attribute itself. Requirement attribute like the value, the priority, the source. For example, if a requirement was being set by a stakeholder that has low power and low interest, and you didn't capture it, and you didn't capture the source of the requirement, and you just document the requirement. At the end of the day, because you don't capture the source, you may end up focusing on something that should be minor. It may just be the wish of the low power, low interest group. But because you didn't capture the source, and at the end of the day, it can cause a lot of problem later for you in the course of your projects. So that's why at the very source of you documenting requirements, you must be able to do or capture the requirement attributes, okay? Because it will help you to manage the requirements within the life cycle as within the project life cycle. And the third thing you must always know also the metrics of the events. You know, it can be the event, it can be your technique, it can be so understanding and documenting the metrics for you to be able to do what, have a future plan, know how long does it take you to carry the work, how many stakeholders did you involve, you know, was it online, was it physical, you know, all of this information, they are the metric of elicitation events, right? So it will help you to plan your future event and to also assess yourself and improve, you know, so that next time when you are planning your work, just like what Goodness asked us in 3 classes ago, and he's saying, oh, how will I know the exact number of hours or of efforts for those works? It is from information like this. So when you remember, oh, when I conducted elicitation 3 years ago with this similar set of stakeholders, with this number, I used 5 days. Okay, you have a basis to plan for future, and also you also have basis to set standard, you know, within the organization. Okay, so the next on our topic now is elicitation techniques. But before we go there, and I think we should open up elicitation techniques tomorrow. So I don't know if anybody have any question so that I can release you early today. Any question from anyone? So are we clear on elicitation now? Dari, for me, are we good?
Yeah, I think I'm good.
Wow, finally. Dari, are we good?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Adenike, are we good on elicitation now?
Maybe I want to put video because I joined the class late, and
Okay.
then my mood today is not good at all. So maybe when I get the video tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. Patrick, are we good?
Yeah, yes. Okay.
Yeah. Olalekan, are we good now?
Yes.
Yeah. So thank you guys for today. We meet tomorrow to continue with elicitation techniques. So tomorrow we'll be looking at elicitation techniques. We just be focusing about the various method of elicitation. You know, I know some of it are, you know, you're already eager. You know, remember, elicitation is doing what? Is digging out requirement from requirement sources. So now tomorrow we'll be looking at what are those various methods that you can use to elicit requirements from requirement sources, you know, because it is very important. Okay. So in the absence of no further questions, I will say have a wonderful evening.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Yeah.